Following the death of Princess Charlotte of Wales in 1817, the British monarchy was in shambles. The succession was in crisis, as Princess Charlotte was the only legitimate grandchild of George III. As a result of this, the remaining unmarried sons of George III married quickly to have children. In 1818, Prince Edward, Duke of Kent and Strathearn, married Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, the sister of Princess Charlotte's widower, Leopold. On the 23rd of May 1819, their only child, Alexandrina Victoria, was born at Kensington Palace. She was christened at Kensington Palace by the Archbishop of Canterbury and named after her godfather, Tsar Alexander I of Russia, and her mother. Victoria was fifth in line to the throne after her father and his three older brothers, George, Frederick, and William, as they had no living legitimate children. When Victoria was less than a year old, her father passed away, followed by her grandfather. In 1827, Frederick died, with George passing in 1830. She was now first in line to the throne. Victoria's childhood was sad and isolated. Her mother and her mother's friend Sir John Conroy devised the Kensington system, which prevented Victoria from meeting people that they deemed unworthy. They also hoped it would make her weak and dependent on them. Victoria didn't have her own room. She had to share with her mother. She studied plenty of languages, including English, French, German, Italian, and Latin, played with dolls, and her only companion was her dog, Dash. From the age of 13, Victoria wrote a daily diary, and they were read by her mother, which Victoria put a stop to once she became queen. She continued this practice throughout her life, filling 122 volumes. During the 1830s, Victoria went on many trips throughout England and Wales, which she disliked as they made her ill and tired. In October 1835, Victoria fell ill, and Conroy and her mother tried to make her appoint Conroy as her secretary, which failed. In May 1836, Victoria met Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha for the first time. Her uncle Leopold hoped the two cousins would marry. However, William IV, Victoria's uncle, disapproved. While Victoria found Albert delightful, she was not ready for marriage. A month after Victoria turned 18, her uncle William IV passed away. She decided to take the regnal name of Victoria. Due to Victoria being a woman, she was unable to inherit the throne in Hanover. Her uncle Ernest Augustus succeeded as King of Hanover. He was Victoria's heir until she had a child. Lord Melbourne, the Prime Minister at the time, formed a close relationship with the young Queen. He offered her much advice and was seen as a father figure by Victoria. Victoria's coronation took place on the 28th of June 1838 at Westminster Abbey. The first 2 years of her reign, Victoria was generally popular. However, a scandal would rock her court and her reputation would suffer. Rumours flew that Lady Flora Hastings, one of her mother's ladies-in-waiting, was pregnant with Conroy's child out of marriage. Victoria believed this to be true, and to determine if the rumour was true, Lady Flora was subjected to a medical examination to determine her virginity. The lady was a virgin, and the Queen's reputation suffered as a result of her maltreatment of Lady Flora, who was dying from cancer. Another situation which put Victoria in hot water was when she refused to replace her ladies-in-waiting with wives of the Tory party, something a new Prime Minister was allowed to do as a sign of neutrality on the part of the monarch not to meddle in politics. Peel, the new Prime Minister, found this Queen's stubbornness difficult to deal with and resigned. Melbourne returned to his office as Prime Minister. Despite being queen, Victoria was not allowed to live by herself due to social norms at the time. She found her mother's proximity stifling and had her sequestered to distant rooms of the palace. Melbourne offered up marriage as a solution, but Victoria was hesitant to marry when she had only just become queen. Victoria met Albert again in October 1839, and after spending a few days with him, she proposed. On the 10th of February 1840, the young couple married in the Chapel Royal in St. James's Palace. Albert replaced Melbourne as the key political and non-political advisor in her life. Victoria soon became pregnant for the first time. While pregnant with her first child, she survived an assassination attempt by Edward Oxford. She was in her carriage with Prince Albert when Oxford shot at her. She was unharmed, and Oxford was arrested and tried for high treason but found not guilty due to insanity. He was detained in an asylum. Victoria's popularity rose. The couple's first child, Victoria Adelaide Mary Louisa, was born on the 21st of November 1840. Despite disliking pregnancy, the Queen went on to have 8 further children. Albert, born 1841, Alice, born 1843, Alfred, born 1844, Helena, born 1846, Louise, born 1848, Arthur, born 1850, Leopold, born 1853, and Beatrice, born 1857. Baroness Louise Lazen ran the Queen's household. She was Victoria's childhood governess and was highly influential on the Queen. Albert thought she mismanaged things and was angry over her treatment of their ill daughter. In 1842, to keep the peace with her husband, Lazen was asked to retire. Victoria survived further assassination attempts by John Francis on the 29th of May 1842 and John William Bean on the 3rd of July 1842. In 1845, Ireland became gripped by a potato blight. This became known as the Great Famine. Victoria became known as the Famine Queen, despite giving £2,000 of her own money to support the Irish people. Victoria would visit Ireland in 1849. In 1843 and 1845, Victoria and Albert stayed in France, with King Louis Philippe I becoming the first British monarch to visit a French monarch since Henry VIII. Louis Philippe returned the favour by visiting in 1844. During 1848, when the possibility of the British monarchy being deposed was of great concern, Victoria and her family left for Osborne House. In 1849, the Queen survived an assassination attempt by William Hamilton, and again in 1850 by Robert Pate. During her final 2 pregnancies, the Queen used chloroform during labour, which greatly improved the experience for her. It is possible that Victoria may have had postnatal depression following her pregnancies, as she was often gripped by feelings of sadness and loss of self-control. In 1851, Prince Albert opened the Great Exhibition to much success. Victoria's eldest child, Princess Victoria, married Prince Frederick William of Prussia in 1858. A year later, the Queen's first of many grandchildren would be born. In March 1861, the Duchess of Kent passed away. Over the years, the Queen and her mother had become much closer and shared a happier relationship than they had had when she was a child. Albert helped more during this time, driving himself to the point of illness several times. In November 1861, the couple became aware that their eldest son, Albert, was sleeping with an actress while stationed in Ireland. Prince Albert travelled to meet his son and confront him about the rumours. In December 1861, Prince Albert fell ill with typhoid fever and died on the 14th of December 1861, driving the Queen into a state of mourning. She blamed her son Albert. She wore black for the rest of her life, avoided the public and secluded herself at Windsor Castle. She rarely appeared in public. Her first public appearance in years was to visit the Royal Horticultural Society's gardens in Kensington. During the 1860s, Victoria became close with a manservant called John Brown from Scotland. They may have had a romantic relationship, but that is only speculation. She published a book called Leaves from the Journal of Her Life in the Highlands, in which she praised Brown a lot. In 1866, Victoria opened Parliament for the first time since her husband's death. She supported the Reform Act of 1867, which gave ordinary men the right to vote. However, she did not support women having the vote. When her son Albert grew seriously ill with typhoid fever in 1871, Victoria became distressed at the thought of losing her son, the same way she lost her husband. However, the Prince of Wales recovered, and in 1872 the mother and son attended a grand service of Thanksgiving, which helped dissipate the Republican movement. Victoria survived yet another assassination attempt. In 1872, Arthur O'Connor waved an unloaded gun at the Queen. John Brown grabbed him and he was arrested. This event improved the Queen's popularity. In 1876, the Prime Minister Disraeli introduced the Royal Titles Act of 1876, which enabled Victoria to take the title of Empress of India. On the 17th anniversary of Albert's death, Princess Alice, the Grand Duchess of Hessen by Rhine, died of diphtheria. This was her first child to die, and she was greatly upset by it. In May 1879, her first great-grandchild, Princess Theodora of Saxe-Meiningen, was born. During the 1870s, the Queen threatened to abdicate a number of times to pressure the PM to act in her favour, but each time it failed. Victoria was in favour of the expansion of the British Empire, believing it to be civilising and peaceful, and protecting the native people from cruel rulers. The Queen survived another assassination attempt in 1882 by Roderick MacLean. When he was found not guilty by reason of insanity, she was outraged but felt it was worth it to see how much one is loved, due to the outpouring of support following the attack. In 1883, Victoria fell down the stairs at Windsor Castle, and it left her suffering from rheumatism for the rest of her life. When John Brown died, the Queen published more leaves from a journal of a life in the Highlands in honour of Brown. In 1884, her youngest son, Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, died. She was upset by this. In April 1884, Princess Beatrice fell in love with Prince Henry of Battenberg, but Victoria was horrified by the possibility of her daughter leaving her and opposed the match. After a year, she agreed to the match, so long as Beatrice and Henry remained nearby. The Queen celebrated her Golden Jubilee in 1887 with a banquet. She also attended a Thanksgiving service in Westminster Abbey. She met Abdul Karim, one of 2 Indian waiters in attendance. She formed a close relationship with him. She promoted him to Munshi. He taught her Urdu and worked as a clerk for her. Her family were appalled. He returned to India upon her death. In 1888, Victoria's eldest daughter became the German Empress, but was widowed soon after. Victoria's eldest grandchild, Wilhelm, became German Emperor and was autocratic. In 1896, she became the longest reigning British monarch. In 1897, she celebrated her Diamond Jubilee with an open-air service outside St. Paul's Cathedral. In 1900, her second son Alfred died, and she noted that that year was horrible. The end of 1900, she was suffering from rheumatism in both her legs and cataracts in both her eyes. On the 22nd of January 1901, she passed away at the age of 81. Her son Albert succeeded her as Edward VII. Her eldest grandson, and her favourite pet Churi were at her deathbed. Her funeral was held on the 2nd of February 1901. Albert, Wilhelm and Arthur, her third son, lifted her body into the coffin. She wore a white dress and her wedding veil, and had a large collection of mementos placed around her in the coffin by family, friends, and servants. One of her husband's dressing gowns and a plaster cast of his hand, as well as a lock of John Brown's hair and a picture of him, were placed in the coffin. She also had a bunch of flowers. She was eventually interred beside her beloved Prince Albert at the Windsor Great Park. She ruled for 63 years.